The sun rose bright over Adelaide on that summer morning, January 26, 1966, Australia Day, casting a golden glow over the Beaumont family's modest home in Somerton Park. Inside, the three Beaumont children, Jane, Arnna, and Grant, buzzed with excitement. The beach was calling to them. Jane, the eldest at 9 years old, took charge as she often did with her younger siblings. She approached her mother Nancy with a hopeful request. Could they go to Glenelg Beach by themselves? Arnna, 7, stood close behind, her eyes wide with anticipation, while 4-year-old Grant clutched his favorite toy, oblivious to the weight of the moment, but eager for adventure. Nancy Beaumont hesitated. It wasn't unusual for children in 1960s Australia to roam freely. Neighborhoods were considered safe, and independence was encouraged from a young age. The beach was only a short bus ride away, and Jane was responsible. Still, something nagged at Nancy, a mother's instinct perhaps, but she pushed it aside. The kids had been to Glenelg many times before. She gave her permission, but set strict instructions. They were to return by noon, no later. Jane nodded earnestly, promising they'd be back on time. Nancy helped pack a small bag, towels, a bit of money for the bus, and maybe an ice cream if they behaved. She kissed each of them on the forehead, unaware that this would be the last time she saw them. The children set off, their laughter fading as they turned the corner toward the bus stop. Nancy watched them go, a fleeting moment of unease passing through her before she turned back to her chores. The house felt quieter without them, but she expected the silence to be broken soon enough by their cheerful return. Little did she know, the decision she had just made would haunt her for the rest of her life. By afternoon, when the clock ticked past the hour they were due back, her worry would grow into panic. The beach was crowded that day, families celebrating the national holiday, children splashing in the surf, but hers were nowhere to be found. Witnesses would later recall seeing the Beaumont children playing near the water, a tall blonde man in swim trunks watching them. Others would remember them buying pastries at a nearby shop, their manners polite, their laughter carefree. But after a certain point, the memories stopped. The bus ride home never happened. The front door never opened to their return. Nancy's last glimpse of her children walking away would become one of the most heartbreaking images in Australian true crime history, a simple, ordinary moment twisted by tragedy. The question would linger for decades. Should she have said no? Could she have known? But in that quiet morning hour, there was only a mother's trust, a child's promise, and the cruel twist of fate that would tear a family apart. Summer in Ypsilanti, Michigan, was supposed to mean backyard barbecues, the hum of cicadas, and college students lounging along the Huron River. But between 1967 and 1969, a different kind of heat gripped the town, a creeping dread that settled into the bones of every parent, every student, every young woman walking home alone after dark. Someone was hunting. The first body was found on July 10, 1967, near an abandoned farm on Geddes Road. Mary Flezer, a 19-year-old Eastern Michigan University student, had vanished weeks earlier after leaving her evening summer class. When her remains were discovered, the brutality was unspeakable. Her hands and feet severed, her body left like discarded trash in the tall grass. The police assured the public it was an isolated tragedy. They were wrong. Over the next 2 years, 6 more young women would disappear, their bodies turning up in ditches, vacant lots, and along lonely stretches of road. Joan Schell, a 20-year-old waitress, was last seen climbing into a blue Chevrolet. Jane Mixer, a University of Michigan law student, accepted what she thought was a ride home. Her body was found with a gunshot wound to the head. Karen Sue Baineman, just 18, had been shopping for a new wig when she met her killer. She was found naked, beaten, and strangled in a wooded area. Her clothes never recovered. The town was paralyzed. Parents kept their daughters indoors. Students walked in pairs. The newspapers dubbed the killer the Michigan murderer, and theories swirled. Was it a trucker, a drifter, a local hiding in plain sight? Then, in August 1969, a break came. A witness came forward, placing John Norman Collins, a 22-year-old EMU student, near the scene of Karen Beaumont's disappearance. He was cocky, arrogant, a man who bragged about his motorcycle and his way with women. When police dug deeper, they found disturbing connections. Collins had been near multiple crime scenes, his alibis were flimsy, and his own cousin would later testify that Collins had shown him one victim's severed hand. The trial was a sensation. Collins smirked in court, convinced he'd outsmart the system. But the evidence was damning. Paint chips matching his car, fibers from his home, and the chilling testimony of those who had crossed his path. In 1970, he was convicted of Karen Beaumont's murder and sentenced to life in prison. The other killings? Officially, they remain unsolved, but few doubt Collins was responsible. Yet even after his arrest, the scars remained. Ypsilanti had learned a terrible lesson, that evil could wear the face of a clean-cut college student. That trust was a luxury they could no longer afford. To this day, the name John Norman Collins lingers like a ghost in Michigan's true crime lore, a reminder of the summer the sun didn't shine and the streets weren't safe after dark. The morning sun glinted off the gentle waves of Glenelg Beach, casting a shimmering light over the sand where children laughed and splashed in the shallows. Among them were the Beaumont siblings, Jane, Arnna, and Grant, their carefree joy blending seamlessly with the cheerful chaos of Australia Day, 1966. To the casual observer, they were just 3 more kids enjoying the summer holiday. But to those who noticed them that day, their presence would later become a haunting memory. An elderly couple, lounging under a striped umbrella, watched as the children built sand castles near the water's edge. Jane, the oldest at 9, took charge, shaping towers with careful hands, while Arnna, 7, dug moats around them. 4-year-old Grant, his cheeks rosy from the sun, giggled as he knocked down the walls, only for his sisters to rebuild them again. The couple smiled at the scene, a perfect snapshot of childhood. Nearby, a teenage lifeguard on break noticed a tall blonde man in blue swim trunks lingering close to the children. He wasn't playing with them, not at first, just watching. The lifeguard thought little of it. Adults often kept an eye on kids at the beach. But later, he'd recall how the man eventually joined in, helping Grant pat down a mound of sand, his movements deliberate, his smile too wide. At the beachside kiosk, the shopkeeper served the children meat pies and pastries. Jane paid with a crisp 1-pound note, an unusually large amount for a child to carry. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow but handed over the treats. As they left, she saw the same blonde man waiting outside, his hand resting lightly on Jane's shoulder as they walked away together. A young mother, pushing a stroller along the promenade, spotted the trio boarding a bus later that afternoon. The man was with them, his arm around Arnna as she climbed the steps. The mother assumed he was their father or an uncle. Why wouldn't she? The children looked relaxed, unafraid. But by evening, when news spread that the Beaumonts had vanished, these ordinary moments took on a sinister weight. The elderly couple, the lifeguard, the shopkeeper, the young mother, each would replay their memories in police interviews, in nightmares, in guilty whispers of, "If only I'd known." The sand castles were long gone, washed away by the tide. The laughter had faded. All that remained were questions. When did a friendly stranger become a predator? When did an ordinary day turn into a nightmare? And why had no one really realized, until it was too late? The witnesses' accounts were fragments of a puzzle that would never be solved. Their glimpses of the children's last hours of freedom became the only evidence that Jane, Arnna, and Grant had ever been there at all. The summer sun hung high over Glenelg Beach, that fateful Australia day, its golden light glinting off the calm waters as children's laughter mixed with the cries of seagulls. Among the crowds of holidaymakers, a figure stood out, not for any overt menace, but for the unnatural intensity of his attention toward three particular children. Witnesses would later describe him with unsettling clarity. A tall man, perhaps in his early 30s, his blonde hair neatly combed back, his lean frame clothed in respectable summer attire rather than swimwear. The sunglasses shielding his eyes gave him an air of quiet sophistication, but also concealed where his gaze lingered as he observed the Beaumont siblings at play. Mary Peterson, a local housewife spreading her picnic blanket nearby, first noticed him standing near the water's edge. He looked like any other young professional enjoying the holiday, she would tell police, her voice trembling. But there was something deliberate about how he watched those children, not like a parent watching their kids, more like a cat watching birds at a feeder. The man moved with calculated patience. At first, he simply stood near where Jane, Arnna, and Grant were building their sandcastle, appearing to admire their work. When little Grant accidentally sent a shower of sand his way, instead of brushing it off irritably as most adults might, he knelt down and began helping with their construction. "I thought he must be their father or uncle," recalled Thomas Whitmore, a retired school teacher who sat nearby. The way he interacted with them seemed so natural at first. But then I noticed the children didn't call him anything, no daddy or mister, just polite responses when he spoke to them. The most chilling account came from 16-year-old lifeguard trainee David Mercer. "He bought them ice creams," David stated. "Not just one each, but several over the hours they were there, like he was earning their trust. The oldest girl, Jane, seemed a bit wary at first, but the little ones took to him quickly." As the afternoon wore on, the man became increasingly bold in his interactions. Witnesses reported seeing him carrying Grant on his shoulders, holding Arnna's hand as they walked along the shoreline, bending down to whisper something that made Jane nod seriously. To casual observers, it appeared to be nothing more than a family outing. The last confirmed sighting came from the beachside kiosk owner, Mrs. Elizabeth Cho. "They all came in together around noon," she recalled. "The children were laughing, completely at ease with him. When Jane paid for their pies with that pound note, the man just smiled and patted her head. As they left, I saw him place his hand on Jane's back to guide her out the door. It looked so ordinary at the time." What none of these witnesses knew was that this carefully constructed facade of normalcy masked something far more sinister. The well-dressed stranger's patient grooming, his calculated movements, his gradual assumption of a caretaker role, all were the meticulously planned steps of a predator about to commit one of Australia's most infamous crimes. By the time anyone thought to question the identity of this blonde stranger, he and the Beaumont children had vanished into the crowded streets of Glenelg, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a nation's collective guilt for not seeing the danger in plain sight. The small beachside ice cream stand was doing brisk business on that sweltering Australia Day afternoon, its colorful umbrellas fluttering in the sea breeze. The vendor, 58-year-old Henry Harry Jenkins, had been serving cones and milkshakes to sunburnt children all morning, but one transaction would later sear itself into his memory with chilling clarity. Around midday, the three Beaumont children, Jane, Arnna, and Grant, approached the counter, their bare feet dusty from the sand. Behind them stood the tall, blond man who had been with them all morning, his shadow falling across the stand as he hovered just slightly apart, watching. "3 vanilla cones, please," Jane said politely, her small hand steady as she reached into her pocket. When she produced a crisp $5 note, an unusually large amount for a child to carry in 1966, Harry raised his eyebrows. "That's quite a lot of money for a young lady," he remarked as he made change, glancing at the man behind them. The stranger offered no explanation, only a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach his eyes. Harry would later recall disturbing details to police, how the man never spoke during the transaction, how his grip tightened on Grant's shoulder when the little boy bounced impatiently, how Jane's normally cheerful demeanor seemed subdued as she accepted the change. Most haunting of all, how the man guided them away not toward the bustling beach, but in the direction of the bus stop, his hand resting possessively on the small of Jane's back. In the days following the disappearance, that $5 bill would become a critical clue. Nancy Beaumont confirmed she hadn't given the children anywhere near that amount, just a few coins for the bus. Police theorized the money might have been part of the stranger's grooming process, a way to gain the children's trust before luring them away. For Harry, the memory became a private torment. "I should have known something was wrong," he told reporters years later, his voice breaking. "That money, it wasn't just payment for ice cream. It was the price of their innocence." The ice cream cones were never finished. Melted remnants were later found discarded near the bus stop, sticky, forgotten evidence of the last ordinary moment before 3 children vanished into thin air. The number 216 bus pulled up to the Glenelg stop just after 12:30 p.m., its doors hissing open to release a wave of beachgoers. Veteran driver Albert Burt Whelan barely glanced at the new passengers boarding, until years later, when the memory would claw its way back with terrifying clarity. "They seemed like any other family," Burt would tell detectives, his hands trembling around a cigarette. The tall blond man had ushered the 3 children aboard with quiet authority. Jane first, then Arnna, with little Grant clutching the stranger's hand as he stumbled up the steps. "The bloke paid for all of them. Coins dropped right in the tray. No words exchanged." What struck Burt later was the unnatural silence. No excited chatter about the beach. No thank you from the children. Just the man's sunglasses, reflecting back Burt's own face as he counted change. The group moved down the aisle, the man steering Jane by her shoulder toward the rear seats. Burt's rearview mirror captured fragments, Grant climbing onto the man's lap, Arnna staring out the window with uncharacteristic quietness, Jane sitting stiffly upright, her hands folded too tightly in her lap. "Got off at stop 14, the empty one near the old biscuit factory," Burt recalled. The industrial area was deserted on the public holiday. No witnesses, no cameras, just the man shepherding his charges into the shimmering heat haze beyond the bus windows. When shown photographs days later, Burt's face drained of color. "That's them. That's the lot." His bus log confirmed the time, 12:34 p.m., the last confirmed sighting of the Beaumont children alive. The afternoon sun beat down on Jetty Road as elderly widow Margaret Connolly lugged her grocery bags home from the shops. She barely glanced at the group crossing the street ahead of her. Just another man with some children, perhaps a father taking his kids home from the beach. "They were walking quick-like," she would later tell police, her voice thick with regret. The little boy, he kept looking back at the beach like he wanted to go back. The man had a firm grip on his hand. What Margaret remembered most was the car, a faded blue Holden sedan, parked haphazardly near the corner, its paint dulled by years of salt air. The man opened the rear door and motioned the children inside. The oldest girl, she hesitated, just for a second, then she climbed in after the others. The engine coughed to life as Margaret passed by, close enough to see the blond man adjusting his sunglasses in the rearview mirror. I thought nothing of it, she wept during her police interview. Just another family heading home. Only when news broke of the missing Beaumont children did the memory resurface, the way Jane had paused with her hand on the car door, the unnatural silence of the children, the peeling sticker on the sedan's bumper that might have said Port or maybe Ford. For decades after, Margaret would freeze every time she saw a blue Holden on Glenelg's streets, her heart pounding as she strained to see the faces inside, always turning away disappointed, the ghosts of those children, forever out of reach. The afternoon sun beat down on Jetty Road as elderly widow Margaret Connolly lugged her grocery bags home from the shops. She barely glanced at the group crossing the street ahead of her, just another man with some children, perhaps a father taking his kids home from the beach. They were walking quick-like, she would later tell police, her voice thick with regret. The little boy, he kept looking back at the beach like he wanted to go back. The man had a firm grip on his hand. What Margaret remembered most was the car, a faded blue Holden sedan parked haphazardly near the corner, its paint dulled by years of salt air. The man opened the rear door and motioned the children inside. The oldest girl, she hesitated, just for a second, then she climbed in after the others. The engine coughed to life as Margaret passed by, close enough to see the blond man adjusting his sunglasses in the rearview mirror. I thought nothing of it, she wept during her police interview. Just another family heading home. Only when news broke of the missing Beaumont children did the memory resurface, the way Jane had paused with her hand on the car door, the unnatural silence of the children, the peeling sticker on the sedan's bumper that might have said Port or maybe Ford. For decades after, Margaret would freeze every time she saw a blue Holden on Glenelg streets, her heart pounding as she strained to see the faces inside, always turning away disappointed, the ghosts of those children forever out of reach. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked past 2 p.m., its rhythmic clicking the only sound in the Beaumonts' suddenly too quiet home. Nancy Beaumont stood by the window, her fingers drumming against the countertop as she strained to see down the empty street. They're just running late, she muttered to herself for the dozenth time, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. The meat pie she'd prepared for their lunch sat cooling on the stove, its crust hardening. By 2:30, Nancy's pacing had worn a path in the living room carpet. She peered out the front door again, half expecting to see Jane's sun-bleached hair bouncing as she led her siblings up the walk. But the sidewalk remained empty. Mrs. Thompson next door. Have you seen the children? Nancy's voice carried an edge of panic as she called over the fence. The neighbor's puzzled headshake sent a cold trickle of fear down Nancy's spine. At 3:17 p.m., her hands shook so violently she misdialed twice before finally connecting with the Glenelg police station. My children, they haven't come home. Nancy choked out, her voice breaking on the last word. The sergeant on duty heard the terror threading through her words and dispatched a car immediately. As she hung up, Nancy's gaze fell on the small pile of belongings left behind. Jane's hair ribbons, Arnna's favorite storybook, Grant's tiny sandals lined up neatly by the door, ordinary objects that now seemed like relics. The wail of approaching sirens shattered the afternoon stillness. Nancy clutched the doorframe, her knees buckling as the terrible truth took hold. This wasn't just lateness. This was the moment her world fractured into before and after. By nightfall, search parties would scour the beach. By morning, the entire nation would know their names. But in that terrible moment of waiting, there was just a mother at her kitchen table, staring at 3 untouched plates, praying for a miracle that would never come. The golden hues of sunset had long faded by the time the first flashlights began bobbing through the dunes like fireflies. Volunteers, neighbors, shopkeepers, off-duty lifeguards moved in grim silence, their beams cutting through the darkness as they scoured every inch of Glenelg Beach. "They were right here," a shaken witness insisted, pointing to the half-collapsed sandcastle near the shoreline. But the tide had erased all traces of the children's play. Only faint indentations remained where small knees had pressed into the sand hours earlier. Police constables moved methodically through the beachside changing rooms, their torches revealing nothing but discarded towels and empty drink bottles. The trash bins yielded no clues, no abandoned clothing, no strange items tossed in haste. Even the ice cream wrappers from the kiosk had been swept away by the afternoon cleanup crew. "It's like they vanished into thin air," muttered an elderly fisherman as he peered under the jetty, his lantern casting eerie shadows on the barnacled pylons. The water lapped hungrily at the wooden posts, giving up no secrets. Near the bus stop, a detective crouched to examine the gutter. No dropped hair ribbons, no tiny footprints in the dust. Just cigarette butts and tram tickets swirling in the night breeze. The biscuit factory parking lot stood empty, its cracked asphalt holding no tire marks, no scuff marks of a struggle, no sign of the mysterious blue sedan. As dawn painted the sky pink, the searchers regrouped with hollow eyes and empty hands. No shoes washed up on shore, no toys left behind as silent witnesses. Not even a single scream had been heard over the holiday crowd's laughter. The terrible truth settled over Glenelg like a fog. 3 bright, lively children had stepped into the sunlight of an ordinary day and left not so much as a shadow behind. By the second day, the absence of evidence was the evidence. Detective Inspector Glenn Rofe stood near the crumbling sandcastle, his polished shoes sinking into the damp sand. The beach should have told a story. Scuff marks, dropped belongings, a trail leading away. But there was nothing. That was what chilled him. "This wasn't an accident," he muttered to his sergeant. "No kid just walks into the ocean and disappears without a trace. And no mother reports her children missing if they've drowned. She'd be screaming at the shoreline, not waiting at home." The witness accounts painted a damning picture. The blonde man had been with them for hours, long enough to earn their trust. He'd paid for their bus fare, eliminating the need for them to speak to the driver. He led them toward an isolated area, the biscuit factory, where no one would see a struggle. This was planned, Rofe concluded. He watched them, learned their routine, knew no parent would question a well-dressed man at the beach. The lack of physical evidence suggested something even darker. The abductor had experience. No fingerprints on the kiosk counter, no reports of a crying child, meaning they'd gone willingly or were subdued quickly. No discarded clothing, he'd either kept them dressed or had brought changes himself. By week's end, the investigation shifted from search to manhunt. Detectives combed through criminal records, psychiatric reports, even naval docking logs. Had a sailor done this before elsewhere? But the most haunting question lingered. Why take all 3? 1 child could be hidden. 3 was a risk. Unless... He wanted them together, Rofe theorized. This wasn't just a crime of opportunity, it was a fantasy. The case would spiral into decades of false leads and dead ends. But in those first days, one truth was already clear. Someone had been waiting for the Beaumont children, and he'd been very, very good at making them vanish. The tip came in on the third day. A waitress at the Seaview Cafe, 2 blocks from the beach, swore she'd served him. "He sat right there," she whispered, pointing to the corner booth with a chipped Formica table. "Ordered a coffee, didn't touch it. Just kept staring out the window, toward the beach." Her hands shook as she described him. Blonde hair slicked back, sunglasses folded in his shirt pocket, a navy blue windbreaker despite the heat. "He left exact change," she recalled. "No fingerprints. I watched him wipe the coins with a napkin first." Other diners had noticed him too. The trucker who saw him scribbling in a small notebook. Were those times? Names? The college student who caught him smiling oddly at a family's children across the room. The busboy who found a single sugar packet left behind, carefully torn lengthwise, not the usual haphazard way. But when detectives rushed to dust the booth, they found it wiped clean. The notebook? Gone. The sugar packet? A dead end. "He knew we'd come looking," Inspector Rofe growled. This wasn't his first time in a diner after whatever he did. Then came the kicker. "He was here the day before, too," the cook admitted. "Asked what time the beach got crowded." A chill went through the room. The man hadn't just taken the children. He'd researched them. The headline exploded across the advertiser's front page. The black and white photograph of Jane, Arnna, and Grant Beaumont staring up from every newsstand, every doorstep, every trembling hand that held the morning paper. Glenelg, South Australia, January 27th, 1966. In a disappearance that has shattered the illusion of safety in suburban Australia, 3 children, Jane, 9, Arnna, 7, and Grant Beaumont, 4, vanished without a trace yesterday from crowded Glenelg Beach during peak daylight hours. Witnesses report seeing the siblings with a tall, blonde stranger in the hours before their disappearance. The nation reacts. Mothers clutch their children tighter at the beach, eyes darting to every unfamiliar face. Fathers organized impromptu search parties, combing nearby scrubland with torches. Police flooded the area, showing the children's photo to shopkeepers, bus drivers, and fishermen. But the most horrifying detail? It should have been impossible. Glenelg Beach had been packed, hundreds of holidaymakers, yet no one saw the moment they were taken. The blonde man had melted into the crowd like smoke. A new fear takes root. The story dominated headlines for weeks, sparking a national hysteria. Is your child safe at the beach? Women's Weekly, The Invisible Predator, How Strangers Lure Children, Truth, Beaumont parents beg for answers. The Sun. For the first time, Australians questioned the unspoken rule of the era. Let children roam free. Playgrounds emptied. School walks became chaperoned marches. The very idea of innocence curdled into suspicion. The headline, that still haunts. But the most devastating column ran weeks later, when hope had dimmed. Not one trace. How does an entire family just stop? Beneath it, the beach photo of the Beaumonts, grinning, sunlit, already ghosts. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.